Here this morning to discuss that and more is Senator Maggie Hassan. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
First, let's talk about this new relief package you're trying to pass. One of the big sticking points is relief for state and local governments. Your bill proposes, I believe, $160 billion. Is it just a non-starter for you, what Senator McConnell and the Republicans have been pushing, which is a bill where they don't want to offer what they call a bailout for states that haven't managed their finances as well?
Well, first of all, what I have been hearing from Granite Staters and my colleagues have been hearing from their constituents all across the country is how critical it is that we come together right now and pass a comprehensive COVID relief package, whether it is individuals whose unemployment benefits may be expiring literally the day after Christmas, or small businesses who know that their business will be down during cold weather and as the pandemic spikes, whether it's hospitals that desperately need our support, schools that are trying to stay open for in-person learning, and generally speaking, public health efforts and state and local governments that need to do this vital work. We need to get more relief assistance out there. And what this bipartisan group of us have done is come together. We looked at what the House passed in the HEROES Act. We looked at what Senator McConnell has continued to stick with in the Senate, which is a very limited bill, and we have come together to hear each other out and find a way forward. And that's what this $908 billion package does. It does include state and local aid. One of the things we have heard not only from governors and mayors, but from the chair of the Federal Reserve and other economists, is that it's absolutely critical that state and local governments get some relief here. We want to keep those frontline workers, teachers, law enforcement, firefighters, public health workers on the job. We also know how critically important it is that we keep as many people employed during this pandemic. So there's a lot of reasons for us to come together and get this done. And I'm encouraged that we're seeing the support for this bipartisan package grow on both sides of the aisle.
You mentioned the added unemployment benefits that are in the bill. I know this is an attempted compromise, so you have to leave some things out. But why not more direct payments to all Americans to try to keep people afloat and stimulate the economy?
You know, some of our colleagues feel very strongly that this shouldn't be what they would refer to as a stimulus bill. It should be a targeted relief bill to the people who really need it, because we do know that there are some people whose financial situation hasn't changed during the pandemic, and there are some people who have been devastated by it. So the point of this bill, the thing we could all agree on, was that we need targeted relief right now as cases surge and unemployment benefits expire, as nursing homes and hospitals need support, as we're trying to keep our kids in school, but that with a new administration coming in, they'll have the opportunity to assess where we are in terms of the pandemic and the economy when they get here. And if they then think further stimulus or relief is needed, they can propose that, and we can go back to work together on whatever that proposal is. But the compromise here is really to see this as a targeted relief bill, and that's why you see the numbers you do and the focus you do.
And we're heading into what will likely be some of the most difficult weeks of the pandemic in terms of numbers, hospitalizations, potentially deaths. Are you concerned that the system here in New Hampshire could be overwhelmed?
Look, I think that that's why you're seeing all state officials, all local officials coming together to really urge people to continue to wear masks, socially distance, wash your hands, stay away from indoor events. Certainly try not to gather inside with others outside of your household who don't have masks on, because we are concerned that as cases surge, that this will put increased strain on our hospital system in particular. So it's just really important. As exciting as the news about the vaccine is, and it is very promising news, and we are very pleased with what the rollout looks like it will be. As exciting as that is, that vaccine is not going to be available in a widespread way for months now. And in the meantime, this is a deadly virus, and we need to do everything we can to slow its spread, not only to save lives, but to keep our hospitals from being overwhelmed.
That vaccine rollout is going to be administered by the state. And through this pandemic, polls have shown voters giving high marks to Governor Chris Sununu for his handling of COVID-19. But do you believe Governor Sununu is doing a good job right now with what's going on here in New Hampshire?
Look, we all have to continue to work together, and we need to follow data and science. We need to be really clear about what our needs are and how we can address them. I think it's absolutely critical that we have more testing capacity in New Hampshire and around the country, especially right now in our nursing homes. And that's something I'll continue to focus on, and it's one of the things we're trying to hammer out in this bill.
When constituents reach out to your office these days, what's the #1 pandemic-related issue that they're bringing to you?
It's a variety of things. It is often unemployment, trying to get unemployment, trying to understand what the rules are for it. We also continue to have people contact us because they didn't get their first stimulus payment. And small businesses are really talking to us a lot about the need for an additional PPP program, that Paycheck Protection Program, because while it was a very important program for many of our small businesses in New Hampshire, thousands of them over the spring and summer. Now, as we see cases rise, people are more reluctant to go into businesses, and certainly our hospitality industry, as the weather gets colder, is seeing the impact. Those are the major things we're hearing, everything from public health to small business aid and unemployment benefits, because as I mentioned earlier, unemployment benefits will expire for many the day after Christmas, and people need to put food on their table. They need to pay their rent. Their landlords need them to pay their rent. So we really need to make sure that people have the resources they need to stay afloat and weather this storm.
President Trump continues to question the outcome of the 2020 election, even as states certify the results and recounts, and there's a lot of scrutiny on the process and all that. But elections in our state and local operations, are there any new laws that are needed, in your opinion, on the federal level to try perhaps to constrain the power of a president or a candidate to attempt to overturn legitimate election results?
Well, it is really concerning, distressing to see the president continue to promote these falsehoods about the nature of our elections. I was proud of the elections that New Hampshire's cities and towns ran. I'm proud of the way Granite Staters stood up and participated, whether it was through absentee ballots or in-person voting. I think it's absolutely important that we remember that one of the bedrocks of our democracy is not only the right to vote, but the understanding that when the election is over, you put your differences to one side, you have a smooth transition of power. It's one of the hallmarks of being an American, and I wish very much that the president would take to heart this understanding that disagreements are part of being an American. We have the First Amendment right to express our disagreements, but we also have an obligation to find common ground, and particularly after elections, to come together and express our belief in the overarching structure of our democracy, that when an election is over, the winner takes office. And if the loser is an incumbent, they help that winner start in as strong a position as they can. And I wish President Trump would demonstrate that kind of leadership here.
What do you think of your colleagues, though, who refuse to refer to Joe Biden as president-elect?
It's very concerning, and I think they know better. And I hope very much that they will acknowledge, as they have, many of them have privately, to the public, that Joe Biden is the president-elect, Kamala Harris is the vice president-elect. I am excited to see them take office, because I know that they are going to focus, like anything, on getting us through this pandemic. They're going to follow public health and science guidelines, and they are also focused on building an economy back that's going to work for everybody. And that's something that I really look forward to working with them on, too. Everything from making sure that we are helping innovators. I want to double and expand the R&D tax credit so that our innovators, especially small businesses and startups, can have that leg up. We know how important job training is going to be. We know how important addressing climate change and lowering healthcare costs is. And then we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that our country continues to be safe, secure, and free. So I'm looking forward to this new administration and to the willingness that they they have to reach across the aisle and work with everybody who's got a good idea and a desire to strengthen our country.
On that policy front, there are a lot of Democrats who are hoping that President-elect Biden, when he is president, will forgive some amount of student loan debt. Where do you draw the line? How much student loan debt should be forgiven by this incoming president?
This is one of the issues that I have been hearing about since my days as governor, right? Students and their families are carrying this burden of student loan debt, and it is a drag on their financial situation, on their capacity to build a better future for themselves and their families. It's also a drag on our economy. The very first bill that I introduced as a senator was a bill that would help delay repayment or actually forgive repayment of student loans for young entrepreneurs right out of school who wanted to start their own business. And I particularly focused on starting businesses in economically distressed parts of the country. I think we also need to continue, and I've been working on this, allowing students to refinance their loans. And we need to make sure that the public service loan forgiveness program actually is accessible to our teachers, firefighters, law enforcement, all the people who qualify for these loan forgiveness because they've engaged in public service. I certainly think there is more work to do on student loan debt reduction or forgiveness. I think it needs to be a targeted approach, and I'm looking forward to the proposals I see from the Biden administration, and I'll evaluate them carefully.